So my story is a personal story. It comes from a very specific perspective, and that's mine. And it's the story of how I transitioned from mainstream life and living to living on small community. I'm actually Malaysian. I was born in Malaysia, but I was raised in Australia. And my first community was where I was born, which is a traditional kampong in Malaysia. It's basically a family village, so all the cousins and aunties, mothers and fathers, they all live in this kind of like a cul-de-sac with traditional bamboo huts, and everybody barters and supports each other, and it's a lovely traditional way of being. But I didn't live there for very long because I left Malaysia when I was 2. So I went to Australia after that. My mother's Australian, my father's Malaysian. And she strongly believed in alternative living. So she brought me up in many different types of small communities all around the world, from in Australia to New Zealand to Canada, America, Holland. And a lot of them were based on spiritual beliefs, on different types of faiths, a lot of hippie movements, but basically everybody wanted to start a new way of living, a kind of a revolution. And I grew up like that for many years. And then as soon as I could, I went back into mainstream society because I'd had enough. And I thought everybody was crazy. So I said to my mother, I'm going to go and live with my grandparents and go to Catholic girls' school and be raised in Western culture. And about 7 years ago, I was living in Australia, and here I am, really happy. Had a catering business. I ran an organic vegetarian catering business, and I had a really great network of friends. I employed people, a bit slow, and it was a pretty good life. But I always felt like something was missing, like my choices for my future were limited, and I didn't have as much autonomy over or control over my environment. So I quit my job and my business, and anyway, I'll start the story. So I worked during the week. Let's go back. I worked during the week for my business, and I took time off on the weekends, and I had a great life and paid my taxes. I was a little bit in debt, but it was manageable. But I always felt this gap, like something was missing, some kind of meaning. And then one day, a friend of my mother's offered me a choice to leave Australia and go and work and volunteer in India for a non-profit organisation. It was a choice that I would never forget. She invited me to work for an organisation called Rose Circles, and they specialised in trying to create community amongst widowed Indian women in impoverished areas in central India. So I sold everything and moved to India, and I became a part of this community. And after a while of working for her charity, I found that when I was giving help and support to these underprivileged women, I felt very happy, and that feeling that I was missing was suddenly there, and it was an amazing feeling. So the people around me then became my new community, and we encouraged each other to work towards positive goals. My new way of life and new attitude of service to others was supported, and I've never looked back. I realized along the way that the company that I keep is vitally important, and it shapes and supports the way I behave and think and live. So I recommend choosing your company well, and that will give you good results. So now I live, going back, in eco-village Brugurania. It's a small eco-village in Poland, and I live there because I feel passionate about the common goal of my community, which is to live in harmony with nature, to nurture and heal the planet. And it's not just about ecology, but more about a balance of spirituality and ecology. There are many reasons why I think people join or start small communities. And the ones that last the longest, in my experience, and work the best, are the ones that are driven by a core belief that makes them stronger. My community is non-denominational, which means we don't have any particular religious belief or political belief. And we're international, and we come together with our own religions, opinions, and morals. But we do have a strong set of common beliefs. We want to live in harmony with nature. We see nature as a living entity, a force that goes beyond ourselves. We practice non-violence, which includes being vegetarian. We take very good care of our animals, and we grow our food organically, and we do use some permaculture practices. We also mainly use ancient Vedic farming practices, which Roy will probably tell you more about later. So we try to step lightly on the planet, and we try to care for her deeply. We see her as a living entity. Because we all have this core belief, our eco-village is able to accept and understand our individual differences and move forward through tough times. A core belief is important to keep community alive. It is a foundation that holds us up and keeps us focused on our goals. I feel for a community to be successful, there needs to be a common belief, not just a political or intellectual ideal, but a strong emotional and heartfelt belief that goes beyond the mind, and it drives your directions and goals. You need to love what you're doing, and you need to be proud of what you're achieving together, and that's the glue. People from community form because most of the time what they need is not provided for in modern society. A strong and supportive functional family is mostly lacking from our lives. The support system of a group of people you can trust with your children and your property is rarely found. The social benefits of communities are numerous. In the right eco-village or small community, a functional family or tribe can be formed, and that group creates a safer place to raise your children. It protects, supports, and inspires. The children in our community learn from all different ages of people, and they learn from a diverse pool of individuals who can offer their own gifts and knowledge. So they have a very broad education. Relationships and family unit have a greater chance at surviving because one has the added resource of a large, extended and caring family. I see in my community that the relationships, the marriages, they seem to be so much more powerful because they're supported by a group of people that care about them staying together. So if they have problems, other people will come in and remind them of why they should stay together. And it creates this incredible support system. And I don't see it elsewhere. I see a lot of, well, in the past I've seen a lot of relationships fail because they just don't have that support from even their own families. Diversity in age groups and different levels of experience all help to teach individuals how to cope and deal with problems. A community forces us to learn how to develop communication skills and resolve conflict. Challenges are met face on and resolved for the good of all. Some more kids here. Every conflict and resolution is a positive step towards moving forward. Some of our community members here, we have a very broad range of ages, from very little to this lady here. She's about to join our community actually this year, and she's 90, I think. And we're actually building pathways for her so she can get around on her scooter because she can't walk. Being able to share resources is a wonderful part of being in community. There are people in our eco-village that work with the bees and do the beekeeping, Rory, and he keeps themselves updated with the latest techniques and lovingly takes pride in his work. And the rest of us benefit with gorgeous homo-organic honey. We have members who are skilled in art, music, building, small business management, psychology, herbal traditional medicine, gardening, hospitality, child rearing, horse training, and much, much more. We pool all of our skills and help each other whenever and wherever we can. We have all developed an attitude of service to each other as a result of being in community. And that attitude of service is, for me, the most important ingredient for success of being in community. Before I found my current community in Poland, I was living and volunteering in India for a women's upliftment movement called Rose Circles. The Rose Circles movement attempted to help widowed women come together in their local areas to form a community that would support itself. In this particular part of rural India, many women have been widowed by HIV and AIDS. Their husbands go away to find work and commonly never return. Widows in these areas are turned away from the family home and sometimes even ostracized by the entire village they live in. In that part of India, such is the stigma attached to HIV, AIDS, and widowed women. So as we explored different communities and villages around this area, it was obvious that there weren't just a few of these cases, there were thousands of them, and many of these women had children and were homeless. So my friend Anne Godfrey started this movement called Rose Circles, which was to encourage women to come together, and we would provide a venue for them to learn a cottage industry, meaning learn how to make, say, how to sew or such things like that. Simple things, but things that they could sell and things that they could make an income out of. And then these women would come together and they would work together and make community. They would give each other, say one woman is freshly kicked out of her house, then the rest of the community would say, okay, well, you can go and stay with Radhika. She's got a spare room. And so people would develop this support network, and they developed a community of women that understood each other's problems. So out of necessity and tragedy, a supportive and loving community was formed. They made patchwork quilts out of recycled materials. So, and we provided some marketing for them to sell that in the West and bring economy into the community. So going into alternative community doesn't mean you have to take such a giant leap. You know, some people aren't ready to sell everything and leave their country and, you know, make that dramatic step and radically change their lives. But there are other ways that people have formed networks with like-minded individuals that are not so dramatic. So here I have an example of actually some friends of mine who have a Homer community in Baltimore, but it's in an urban setting, and they've been going since the 70s, and they come together every week to support and strengthen their local community. There are 35 people who live in their own homes in different parts of the city. They are comprised of teachers, nurses, psychologists, yoga instructors and actors and dancers and many more. And they do a lot of outreach in and around Baltimore, working with young people on anti-crime programs and social work. And their common connection is service to others. That is their core belief. They have just recently bought a farm. The whole community has come together to buy this land, and they still live in the city, but they all own this land, and they're going to start growing organic vegetables for the community. And they've named the place Ancient Oaks. So there are many reasons to start a community. Our eco-village ultimate goal is to be entirely self-sustainable. We aren't totally self-sustainable yet, but we are getting there, and we have the resources and skills to make our way there. And for me, it is such a wonderful feeling to be part of this positive revolution from the grassroots level. I would encourage those who feel passionately about starting or joining a community to seek out others with similar goals. And there's no time like the present to pioneer a new way of living. So the question is not why do small communities form, but how can we encourage and support more of them? There are so many of us now who are longing for a new way of life. People are finding it harder and harder to thrive in today's society. Forming small communities is like a proactive protest. By starting or joining forces with a group who have similar ideals to you and are pioneering an alternative way to live, you are actively creating a new future. You are not taking down a system or even fighting one. You are creating and nurturing a new world.